William Dickerson dismissed Marcus Chen's fourth call in 12 minutes. His CTO's warnings about critical system vulnerabilities, nothing more than paranoid noise 90 minutes before the biggest product launch of his career. The proprietary algorithm humming across his monitors had made him untouchable, and in 1 hour, it would make him a legend. The first screen flickered at 10:47 a.m. Then the cascade began. Red error messages flooded every monitor, followed by a message William had never programmed. Algorithm compromised. Executing protocol Omega. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Override commands, admin credentials, emergency shutdowns. Nothing responded. In 5 minutes and 17 seconds, the algorithm executed thousands of catastrophic trades, systematically annihilating $5 billion in market value. The emergency board meeting felt like an execution. Edward Vance stood at the head of the table, his expression carrying none of their usual camaraderie. The damage is irreversible. Criminal investigations are pending. William, effective immediately, you are removed as CEO. The vote was unanimous, 13-0. Security escorted him through the lobby, while employees pressed themselves against walls and camera phones captured every angle of his fall. William stood on the sidewalk 72 stories below his former kingdom, watching his empire burn on every screen pointed in his direction. If you believe arrogance destroys empires, hit subscribe. People who ignore warnings never will. Comment listen before it's too late if you're done with leaders who refuse to hear the truth. The penthouse had never felt this large. William stood in the center of the living room, where he'd hosted senators and tech moguls, where champagne had flowed and deals worth hundreds of millions had been sealed with handshakes, and heard nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic 72 floors below. His phone sat face down on the marble counter where he'd thrown it after the 37th call went to voicemail. Reporters, former colleagues, investors, all circling the wreckage of his reputation like sharks drawn to blood in the water. 3 days had passed since the collapse. 3 days of watching his face on every news channel, his name trending on social media alongside words like negligence and fraud and criminal investigation. The financial press had turned him from visionary to cautionary tale in a single news cycle. Former friends weren't returning calls. His lawyer had very carefully used the phrase potential criminal exposure 4 times during their last conversation. His accountant had been more direct. William, you're looking at complete financial ruin. The lawsuits alone will take everything. Everything. The word kept echoing in the silence. The penthouse would go first. Foreclosure papers had already been served. His accounts were frozen pending investigation. The luxury cars, the vacation homes, the art collection he'd bought because someone told him it was what people at his level did. All of it would be liquidated to pay creditors who were already filing claims. He'd built an empire worth billions and somehow ended up with debts that exceeded even that. The irony was that he'd designed his entire life to never need anyone. No close friends to disappoint him, no family to make demands, no relationships that couldn't be reduced to their transactional value. He'd convinced himself that independence was the same thing as strength, that not needing people made him powerful. Now, sitting in a penthouse that would belong to someone else within weeks, he realized he'd simply made himself alone. The sound of a key in the lock startled him. For a disoriented moment, William thought it might be security coming to escort him out early, but then he remembered. It was Friday, Gail Gregory's day to clean. She appeared in the entryway carrying her supplies, moving with the same quiet efficiency she'd displayed for the past 6 years. William watched her from the living room, suddenly uncertain. Did she know what had happened? Of course she knew. Everyone knew. The question was whether she'd come to clean the home of a disgraced billionaire out of professional obligation, or because she simply hadn't heard she could stop coming. Gail set down her cleaning caddy and looked at him directly for perhaps the first time in 6 years. Her eyes were kind but not pitying, steady but not judgmental. "Mr. Dickerson," she said simply, acknowledging his presence the way he'd never acknowledged hers. "You don't have to," William started, his voice rougher than he'd intended. "I mean, I can't exactly pay you right now. Everything's frozen." The accounts, the credit cards, all of it. I know, Gail said. She moved into the kitchen, and William heard her opening cabinets, running water. When's the last time you ate? The question caught him off guard. I don't, yesterday maybe. I'm not hungry. That's not what I asked. She appeared in the doorway, holding a plate with a sandwich she'd apparently assembled from whatever she'd found in his refrigerator, along with a glass of water. She set both on the coffee table in front of him with the same care she might use arranging flowers. You need to eat something. William stared at the plate, something hot and unfamiliar building in his chest. Why are you being kind to me? Gail met his eyes again, and this time William saw something in her expression he couldn't quite name. Not quite sympathy, not quite sadness, something deeper and more complicated. Because you're a person who's hurting, Mr. Dickerson. That's reason enough. She returned to the kitchen, and William heard her beginning her usual routine. The soft sound of cleaning, the running water, the quiet organization of a space that had fallen into chaos. He picked up the sandwich with hands that shook slightly, took a bite he didn't taste, and felt something crack in the armor he'd spent decades building. For 6 years, this woman had moved through his home like a ghost, visible only when he needed something, invisible the moment the need was met. He'd never asked about her life, never wondered if she had family or dreams or struggles of her own. He'd reduced her to a function, a service, a line item in his household budget. And now, when he had nothing to offer her, when he couldn't even pay her for her time, she'd brought him a sandwich and told him he was a person who deserved kindness. William ate slowly, listening to Gail work in the next room, and for the first time since the collapse, felt something other than rage or despair. He felt shame, deep, burning shame for every time he'd looked through her instead of at her, for every moment he'd treated her presence as wallpaper instead of humanity. When she appeared again, he looked up. Gail, he said, testing her name in his mouth for the first time. Thank you. For the food. For coming. For. He gestured helplessly at the apartment, at himself, at everything. For seeing me when I never saw you. She nodded once, a small acknowledgement that felt somehow enormous. We all need help sometimes, Mr. Dickerson. Pride just makes us pretend we don't. She paused in the doorway, considering something. My daughter, Serena, she's good with computers. Studies computer science at the community college. If you wanted someone to look at what happened to your system, she might be able to help. William's instinct was immediate dismissal. What could a community college student do that his team of experts couldn't? But he caught himself, heard the arrogance in the thought, and swallowed it. I'd appreciate that, he said instead. If she's willing. Gail smiled just slightly. I'll ask her. Serena Gregory arrived at 8:30 that evening carrying a laptop bag that had seen better days and wearing jeans with a university hoodie that definitely hadn't come from anywhere in the Ivy League. William opened the door, and his first thought, the one he was immediately ashamed of but couldn't quite suppress, was that she looked like a student who'd wandered into the wrong building. She couldn't have been more than 21, with natural hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. Mr. Dickerson, she said, extending her hand with a formality that somehow made him feel even more uncomfortable. I'm Serena. My mom said you might need help with a computer issue. Thank you for coming. William stepped aside to let her in, watching her take in the penthouse with eyes that didn't widen with the usual awe. If anything, she seemed to be calculating square footage and maintenance costs with the practical assessment of someone who knew exactly how much work went into keeping a place like this clean. I appreciate you taking the time, though I'm not sure there's much anyone can do at this point. My entire IT department couldn't figure out what happened. Mom said your system crashed during a product launch. Serena set her bag down on the dining table, pulling out a laptop that was at least 3 generations old, its case held together with what looked like electrical tape. Do you still have access to any of the error logs? William hesitated, feeling the familiar superiority creeping back into his voice despite his best efforts to suppress it. The error logs were examined by some of the best cybersecurity experts in the industry. People with degrees from MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon. They found nothing conclusive. Serena looked up at him with eyes that were disturbingly direct. And yet your $5 billion system still crashed. So maybe they missed something. She paused, her expression softening slightly. Look, Mr. Dickerson, I know what you're thinking. Community college student, secondhand laptop. What could I possibly see that your expensive experts couldn't? And maybe you're right. Maybe I won't find anything. But it's Friday night, and I'm here, so you might as well let me try. The bluntness of it caught William off guard. She'd articulated his exact thoughts, acknowledged them without defensiveness, and somehow made him feel small for having them. You're right, he said quietly. I'm sorry. Let me get you access to what we have. He set her up at the dining table with his personal laptop, the one device that hadn't been seized by investigators or locked down by the board. She worked in silence, her fingers moving across the keyboard with a speed and confidence that suggested she'd been doing this a lot longer than her age would indicate. William found himself watching from the living room, initially out of skepticism, then gradually out of genuine curiosity. She didn't work like the corporate technicians he'd seen, all sterile efficiency and standardized protocols. Instead, she worked like someone solving a puzzle they found genuinely interesting, occasionally muttering to herself, opening and closing windows in patterns that seemed almost musical. An hour passed, then two. William made coffee without asking if she wanted any, just set a cup beside her laptop. She nodded thanks without looking up. Around midnight, he tried to make conversation. How long have you been studying computer science? Officially? 3 years at community college. She didn't stop typing. Unofficially? Since I was 12 and figured out how to bypass the parental controls on our library's computers so I could access the coding tutorials they'd blocked. A slight smile. My mom was not impressed. Why community college? The question came out before William could stop it, and he immediately regretted the implication. But Serena didn't seem offended. Because it's what we could afford. Because I could work part-time and still take classes. Because not everyone has the luxury of going into six-figure debt for a degree that might not even guarantee a job. She finally looked up at him. And because some of us are more interested in learning actual skills than collecting prestigious credentials. The rebuke was gentle but unmistakable. William returned to the living room, feeling the weight of assumptions he'd carried his entire life suddenly becoming visible, like someone had turned on lights in a room he'd always walked through in darkness. At 3 a.m, he found her still working, now surrounded by pages of handwritten notes covered in diagrams and code fragments. He'd dozed off on the couch and woke to find her deep in concentration, the blue light from her screen painting her face with an almost ethereal glow. You should sleep, he said. This can wait until morning. Almost there, she murmured, her eyes never leaving the screen. There's something weird in the execution pattern. The crash wasn't random. It was too efficient, too targeted. It's like, she trailed off, typing faster. It's like someone designed it to cause maximum damage in minimum time. William sat up straighter. What do you mean designed? I mean your system didn't crash, Mr. Dickerson. Serena turned the laptop toward him, pointing at a section of code that meant nothing to him, but apparently meant everything to her. It was executed. Someone planted malware months ago and triggered it remotely. This wasn't negligence or bad luck. This was sabotage. The word hung in the air between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. William stared at the screen, at the code this community college student with the taped-together laptop had found, and felt the ground shift beneath him again, but this time towards something that felt almost like hope. Can you prove it? He asked. Serena met his eyes, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she smiled. Give me until morning. And Mr. Dickerson, you might want to start making a list of everyone who had high-level access to your systems 6 months ago. Because whoever did this, they weren't some random hacker. They were already inside. William woke to sunlight streaming through the penthouse windows and the smell of coffee he had made. For a disorienting moment, he thought he'd dreamed the entire night, but then he saw Serena still at the dining table, now surrounded by what looked like a murder board constructed from printer paper, sticky notes, and hand-drawn diagrams connected by lines of varying colors. She'd clearly raided his home office for supplies. You didn't sleep, he said, stating the obvious. Couldn't. She turned toward him, and despite the exhaustion evident in her eyes, There was an energy there that hadn't been present last night. The electric intensity of someone who'd found something significant. "Mr. Dickerson, you need to see this." He crossed to the table, coffee forgotten. Up close, the papers resolved into a timeline stretching back 8 months, marked with dates, access logs, and fragments of code. Serena's handwriting was small and precise, annotations filling every margin. "I spent the night tracing the malware backwards," she began, pointing to the most recent date, the day of the crash. The execution was clean, professional, almost elegant. But malware this sophisticated doesn't just appear overnight. It has to be built, tested, integrated into existing systems without triggering security protocols. Her finger moved backwards through the timeline. "So I looked for anomalies. Tiny changes in your system architecture that wouldn't raise flags individually, but together formed a pattern." William leaned closer, trying to follow her logic. "What kind of pattern?" "Someone was building a ghost infrastructure inside your legitimate system. Think of it like constructing a second building inside the first one, using the same foundation but creating hollow spaces in the walls." She pulled up a visualization on her laptop showing his system architecture, certain sections highlighted in red. These modifications happened over 6 months, always during off-peak hours, always through authenticated admin access. "So there was someone inside the company," Williams said, feeling his stomach tighten. "Someone with high-level credentials." "Not just high-level." Serena's expression grew more serious. "The highest level. This code was planted using master administrative access, the kind only 3 or 4 people in your entire organization would have." She pulled up another document, this one showing access logs. "I cross-referenced the timestamps of the code modifications with your security system. Every single change was made late Friday nights, between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. over a 6-month period." William stared at the dates, a cold recognition settling in his chest. Friday nights. Edward Vance always worked late on Fridays. He used to joke about it, called it his strategic planning time when the office was quiet. "Edward Vance," Serena repeated, typing the name into her search. "He's on your board, right?" "He's been on my board for 8 years. He was one of my earliest investors, backed me when most venture capitalists thought I was insane." William's voice sounded distant to his own ears. "We played golf together. He came to my product launches." He stopped, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. "He always had access to everything. I trusted him completely." Serena pulled up another screen. "Every modification traces back to an access key registered to his executive account. But here's what's really damning. Look at this." She showed him a piece of code, pointing to a specific section. "Programmers are like writers, Mr. Dickerson. We all have signatures, little habits in how we structure our code. This particular pattern, the way the variables are named, the commenting style, the error handling, matches code from a security audit Vance personally oversaw 2 years ago. I found samples in your archive project files." William sat down heavily, the enormity of it crushing the air from his lungs. He didn't just sabotage the algorithm. He planned this for months. The Friday night sessions, the security audit that gave him access to everything, the timing of the crash right before the launch when it would cause maximum damage. His hands clenched into fists. "He destroyed me deliberately. It's worse than that." Serena's voice was gentle but firm. "Look at what the malware actually did during the crash. It didn't just execute random bad trades. It executed specific trades designed to transfer maximum value to specific accounts before destroying the system's credibility. Someone made an enormous amount of money while you lost everything. He profited from my destruction." William's voice was barely above a whisper. "He didn't just want me out. He wanted to strip the carcass." Serena nodded. "And then he led the board vote to remove you, positioning himself as the responsible adult making hard decisions. Classic misdirection. Be the loudest voice calling for accountability while your fingerprints are all over the crime." William stood, pacing to the windows, staring down at the city that suddenly felt like enemy territory. Everything he'd thought he understood about the collapse had been wrong. It wasn't his arrogance or negligence or bad luck. It was calculated, cold-blooded betrayal by someone he'd considered a friend. Someone he'd trusted with everything. "Can we prove this?" he asked, turning back to Serena. "Can we prove it was Vance? What I have now is compelling but not conclusive." A good defense attorney would argue the access key was compromised, that someone used his credentials without his knowledge. She gestured at her makeshift evidence board. "We need more. We need the original files from your company's servers, the ones with complete audit trails showing not just the what but the when and where. We need documentation that places Vance physically at his terminal during these Friday night sessions. Those files are on the company mainframe, which I no longer have access to." William felt hope beginning to deflate. "The board seized all my credentials. I can't even get into the building." Serena looked at him steadily. "You can't, but there might be someone who can." William frowned, not understanding. Then it hit him. "Your mother. She has a service key, access to the building during off hours for cleaning. She knows the security patterns, the blind spots in camera coverage, the routes maintenance uses that bypass the main security checkpoints." Serena's expression was carefully neutral. "But Mr. Dickerson, you need to understand what you'd be asking. My mom has worked for your company for 6 years. She's never asked for anything, never caused problems, never given anyone a reason to question her. If she helps us and we get caught, she loses everything. Her job, her reputation, possibly faces criminal charges for corporate espionage." The weight of it settled on William's shoulders. Gail had shown him kindness when he deserved none. Now he was about to ask her to risk everything she'd built on the slim chance they could prove a conspiracy that would pit them against one of the most powerful men in the industry. But if they didn't try, Edward Vance would get away with it. He'd walk away wealthy beyond measure, while William took the fall for crimes Vance had committed. "I need to ask her myself," William said finally. "She deserves to hear it from me, to make the choice with full knowledge of the risks." Serena nodded slowly. "She's working a cleaning shift tonight at a building downtown. I can text you the address." She paused. "Mr. Dickerson, when you ask her, don't make it about justice or revenge or clearing your name. Make it about the truth. My mom spent her whole life watching powerful people lie and get away with it. If you want her help, show her you actually care about what's true, not just what benefits you." William met her eyes and saw the test in them. One more chance to prove he'd learned something from his fall. "I will," he said. "I promise." The office building where Gail worked her evening shift was nothing like the gleaming tower that had housed Dickerson Technologies. This was utilitarian corporate architecture from the 80s, the kind of place where insurance adjusters and mid-level accountants spent their days in beige cubicles under fluorescent lights. William waited in the lobby, watching through the glass doors as Gail moved efficiently through the third-floor offices, her cleaning cart visible in the windows above. He'd rehearsed what to say during the entire cab ride over. Every version sounded either too transactional or too manipulative, asking for help while trying to disguise the enormity of what he was actually requesting. Serena's words kept echoing in his mind. "Make it about the truth, not what benefits you." Gail emerged from the elevator at 9:15, stopping short when she saw him waiting. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she set down her supplies and crossed the lobby with the same steady composure she'd shown in his penthouse. "Mr. Dickerson," she said, and he heard the question in her voice. "Why are you here?" "I need to ask you something," William began, then stopped himself. "No, that's not right. I need to tell you something first, and then I need to ask you something, and you need to know you can say no without any consequences or hard feelings or judgment." Gail's expression softened slightly. "Why don't we sit down?" They took seats in the lobby's waiting area, cheap plastic chairs that creaked under weight. William had negotiated $100 million deals in boardrooms designed by award-winning architects, but he'd never felt as exposed as he did now, sitting under harsh fluorescent lights with a woman he'd ignored for 6 years. "Serena found something," he said. "Evidence that the crash wasn't my negligence. It was sabotage, planned over months by someone I trusted. Edward Vance. He planted malware in my system and triggered it at the exact moment that would cause maximum damage. He profited while I lost everything." Gail listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. But what Serena found isn't enough to prove it conclusively. We need the original files from the company mainframe, the complete audit trails that would show Vance's involvement beyond any doubt. William paused, forcing himself to meet her eyes. Those files are in the building I can no longer access. But you can. You have a service key, you know the security patterns, you know how to move through that building without being seen. You want me to help you break into Dickerson Technologies, Gail said quietly. It wasn't a question. Yes, and I need you to understand what that means. If we get caught, you lose your job, not just with my company, but possibly anywhere in this industry. You could face criminal charges. Everything you've built, the stability you've created for yourself and Serena, all of it would be at risk. William's voice roughened. I have no right to ask this of you. No right at all. You've shown me more kindness in the past week than I probably deserve, and now I'm asking you to risk everything to help me prove something that mainly benefits me. Gail was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with an intensity that made him want to look away. Why should I believe you're different now? She finally asked. A week ago, you couldn't even remember my name. Now you're asking me to commit a crime for you. How do I know this isn't just another version of you using people and throwing them away when they're no longer useful? The question hit like a physical blow, but William didn't flinch from it. You don't know that. You can't know that. All I can tell you is that I spent 6 years looking through you like you were invisible, and I was wrong. Profoundly, shamefully wrong. Not just about you, but about what makes people valuable, what makes them worth seeing. He leaned forward slightly. Serena is brilliant in ways I never bothered to recognize because she didn't come from the right schools. You have dignity and strength I never acknowledged because I measured worth in all the wrong ways. And if I spend the rest of my life trying to be better than I was, I'll still owe you both more than I can ever repay. That's not an answer to my question, Gail said, but her voice was gentler. No, William admitted. The honest answer is you're taking a leap of faith. You're trusting that people can change, that being broken open can make someone better instead of just bitter. And maybe I'll prove you wrong. Maybe I'll disappoint you the way I've disappointed everyone else. But Gail, I swear to you, this isn't about revenge or getting my empire back. It's about the truth. It's about proving that people like Edward Vance can't just destroy lives and walk away wealthy. And it's about trying to be someone worth the faith you and Serena have shown me. Gail stood, and William's heart sank, certain she was about to walk away. Instead, she extended her hand. We go tomorrow night, she said. And Mr. Dickerson, if you ever make me regret this, you'll answer to my daughter. And trust me, that's scarier than any board meeting you've ever faced. William took her hand, feeling the strength in her grip, and managed a small smile. I believe you. They approached Dickerson Technologies at 11:45 on Saturday night, when the building's skeleton crew of security guards would be deep into their routines, comfortable and complacent. William wore dark clothes that felt foreign on his body. Jeans and a black jacket borrowed from Serena's friend, so different from the tailored suits that had been his uniform for 20 years. Gail carried her cleaning supplies as she always did, the familiar cart and buckets that made her invisible to anyone who might be watching. Serena had her laptop bag and a portable hard drive that would clone the mainframe data if they could access it. Service in trance is around back, Gail said quietly, leading them away from the gleaming main lobby where William had walked thousands of times. Instead, she guided them down an alley to a plain metal door marked only with a faded number 3. She swiped her key card, and the lock clicked open with a sound that seemed deafening in the silence. The service corridor beyond was nothing like the building William knew. No marble floors, or art installations, or carefully designed lighting. Just concrete walls painted industrial beige, flickering fluorescent tubes, and the smell of cleaning chemicals and machine oil. Pipes ran exposed along the ceiling. The floor was scuffed from years of cartwheels and equipment dollies. Stay close and stay quiet, Gail whispered, moving with the confidence of someone who'd walked these halls countless times. Security cameras cover the main corridors, but nobody bothers monitoring the service areas. Why would they? It's just the cleaning staff. The invisible infrastructure, William thought, following her through passages he'd never known existed in his own building. For 6 years, Gale had navigated this hidden network while he rode executive elevators and walked carpeted hallways, completely oblivious that there was an entire second building threaded through the first, used by people he'd never bothered to see. They climbed service stairs, narrow and utilitarian, the kind designed for function rather than comfort. At each landing, Gale paused, listening, then gestured them forward. On the 14th floor, she led them through a maintenance room filled with HVAC equipment, through a door William would have sworn was just a utility closet, and suddenly they were in a familiar hallway. The executive floor, just 30 feet from William's former office. "The server room is on 16, Serena whispered. "Can we access it this way?" Gale nodded, already moving back toward the service stairs. 2 floors up, she swiped them through another anonymous door, and they emerged in a corridor William had walked 100 times. The server room door loomed ahead, its biometric scanner glowing red in the dimness. "That's going to be a problem," William said, staring at the scanner that required both keycard and fingerprint, neither of which he possessed anymore. "Not necessarily." Serena pulled out a small device from her bag, something that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. "Service maintenance override. Every secure room has to have emergency access for repairs. The codes rotate weekly, but..." She pulled out her phone, showing a photo of a maintenance schedule. "Your facilities manager keeps the current codes in his office. Mom photographed it last night." William stared at Gale, who shrugged slightly. "You weren't the only one preparing for this." Serena entered the code, and the door clicked open. The server room stretched before them, rows of black towers humming with cool precision, lights blinking in patterns that looked almost organic. William had been in this room dozens of times for tours and presentations, but he'd never actually understood what he was looking at. To him, it had always been abstract, just the machinery that made his vision real. Now, watching Serena move between the servers with the ease of someone reading a familiar book, he saw it differently. This was her language, her territory. She connected her laptop to a terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I'm in," she murmured, looking for the executive backup files. Everything Vance accessed, every modification he made, all of it should be. She paused, eyes widening. "Oh my God, what?" William moved closer, though the code on her screen meant nothing to him. "There's a hidden directory. Project Olympus. It's massive, encrypted, and it's been accumulating data for 18 months. Her fingers moved faster. "This isn't just evidence of the sabotage. This is documentation of something much bigger. He wasn't just planning to destroy your company. He was planning to steal it completely." The server room door clicked behind them. William's blood turned to ice as footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, accompanied by the crackle of a security radio. Serena's eyes met his, wide with panic, her hand frozen over the keyboard. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before someone discovered them in a secure area they had no authorization to access. Gale was already moving, her hand on William's arm, pulling him toward a door he hadn't noticed. Another service entrance, another invisible passage in the building's hidden architecture. "Download it now," Gale whispered urgently to Serena. "We're leaving the second it's done." The footsteps grew louder. The radio crackled again, closer now. Serena's progress bar crawled across the screen with agonizing slowness. 72%, 75, 80. The door handle began to turn. 93%. The progress bar seemed frozen, seconds stretching into eternities as the door handle continued its slow rotation. Serena's hand hovered over the laptop, ready to rip the connection free and run, but doing so would corrupt the download and leave them with nothing. Gale moved with sudden decisiveness. She grabbed her cleaning cart, positioned it in the corridor outside the server room, and called out in a voice louder than William had ever heard her use. "Sorry, spilled cleaner on the floor. Give me just 1 second to wipe it down before you step in it." The door stopped opening. A male voice, irritated. "Gale, what are you doing up here this late?" "Monthly deep clean of the executive floor," she said smoothly, already pulling out supplies. creating the sound of someone actively working. You know how management is about keeping everything perfect for Monday morning. Did they change the schedule on you again? 98%. William held his breath, watching Serena's screen while listening to Gail buy them precious seconds with nothing but conversational misdirection. Nobody told me about any deep clean, the guard said, suspicion creeping into his voice. I should verify. Oh, you know what? I think I have the work order in my card. Let me find it for you. 100%. Download complete. Serena disconnected with hands that barely shook, despite the adrenaline William could see coursing through her. She packed the hard drive in her bag while William moved silently to the service door Gail had indicated earlier. Through the crack, he could see Gail methodically searching through papers on her card, the guard waiting with increasing impatience. I must have left it in my supply room, Gail said finally. But I can show you. An alarm suddenly shrieked through the building, red lights strobing in the hallway. The guard's radio exploded with chatter. Unauthorized server access detected on 16. All units respond. The guard's hand went to his radio, his other reaching for the server room door. Gail stepped deliberately into his path, her cleaning cart creating a barrier. What's happening? Is there a fire? Ma'am, step aside. Now. But those 2 seconds of delay were enough. William and Serena were already through the service door, moving fast through the maintenance corridor as the alarm wailed behind them. They heard the guard enter the server room, heard his shouted report into the radio. Server room appears empty, but someone was definitely here. Terminals still warm. This way, Serena whispered, pulling William deeper into the service passages. Behind them, they heard more voices, more footsteps, security converging on the 16th floor. Gail caught up to them at the service stairs, moving with controlled urgency. Down, not up. They'll lock down the executive floors first, but they won't think about the loading dock until they've secured the main exits. They descended rapidly, the alarm's wail echoing through concrete stairwells. William's heart hammered against his ribs as he followed Gail through passages that twisted and doubled back in ways that defied his mental map of the building. She navigated without hesitation, years of invisible labor translating into perfect knowledge of the building's hidden anatomy. On the 4th floor, they heard boots pounding up the main stairs, security teams rushing toward the server room. Gail pressed them against the wall, waiting for the footsteps to pass, then led them through a door marked mechanical access only. The space beyond was filled with industrial HVAC equipment, the sound providing cover for their movement. Gail navigated around massive air handlers and through a narrow passage that emerged in a freight corridor. Ahead, William could see loading dock doors, the blessed darkness of the outside world visible through the gap beneath. Loading dock access requires a card after hours, William said, spotting the scanner beside the doors. Not the manual override. Gail moved to what looked like a simple electrical panel, opened it to reveal a mechanical lever. Fire code requires manual exits from every section. You just have to know where they are. She pulled the lever. The loading dock door began to rise with a grinding sound that seemed catastrophically loud. They didn't wait for it to fully open, ducking under when there was barely 3 feet of clearance, emerging into the cool night air of the alley behind the building. Behind them, they heard shouts, running footsteps. Someone had heard the door opening. Run, Gail said simply, and they ran. They didn't stop until they were 6 blocks away, pressed into the shadows of a closed storefront, gasping for breath while security vehicles screamed past toward the building they'd just escaped. Serena clutched her laptop bag against her chest like a lifeline. Did we get it? William asked when he could speak. Is the download intact? Serena checked her hard drive with shaking hands, then looked up with a fierce smile. We got it. All of it. Project Olympus, complete and unencrypted. Then let's find out what Edward Vance has been planning, William said. They had the evidence. Now, they just needed to survive long enough to use it. Gail and Serena's apartment was a 40-minute subway ride from the gleaming financial district, located in a modest building where the elevator worked intermittently and the hallway carpet had seen better decades. The living room was small but meticulously organized, with a couch that had been reupholstered at least once, bookshelves made from cinder blocks and planks, and a dining table that doubled as Serena's workspace. Everything was clean, cared for, and utterly unlike any space William had inhabited in 20 years. "Make yourself comfortable," Gail said, already moving to the kitchen. "I'll put on coffee. We're going to need it." William sat carefully on the couch, suddenly hyper-aware of his presence in their space, the intrusion of his crisis into their carefully maintained world. On the walls were framed photos, Serena at various ages, graduation pictures, Gail with people who were probably family. A whole life he'd never bothered to imagine existed beyond the woman who cleaned his penthouse. Serena set up her laptop on the dining table, connecting the hard drive with the precious data they'd risked everything to obtain. Okay, let's see what Vance was really planning. The Project Olympus files unfolded like a masterclass in corporate theft. 18 months of documentation detailing not just the sabotage of Williams' algorithm, but a comprehensive plan to acquire Dickerson Technologies at bankruptcy prices, strip its valuable IP, and rebuild it under Vance's control. There were communications with board members, financial projections showing expected profits from shorting the stock before the crash, even drafted press releases announcing Vance's rescue of the failing company. He planned everything, Williams said, staring at the screen with a mixture of rage and unwilling admiration for the sophistication of the betrayal. The crash was just the opening move. He was going to buy my company's corpse and resurrect it as his own empire. "Look at the timeline," Serena said, pointing to a Gantt chart. "He started planning this 6 months after joining your board. He's been working toward this for over 7 years." Gail set down coffee mugs, looking over their shoulders at the damning evidence. "Can you use this? Is it enough to prove what he did?" "It's enough to bury him," Serena said. "Financial fraud, corporate sabotage, securities manipulation. This is federal prison time, not just civil penalties." Williams sat back, the weight of vindication somehow heavier than he'd expected. They had the proof. They could destroy Edward Vance the way Vance had tried to destroy him. Justice was finally within reach. But looking around this small apartment, at the woman who'd risked her job to help him and the daughter who'd spent sleepless nights unraveling a conspiracy that barely affected her own life, William found himself thinking about different questions. Not just how to punish Vance, but what came after, what he would build from the ashes, who he would build it with. "Serena," he said quietly, "when this is over, when we've exposed Vance and cleared my name, I want to start something new. Not rebuild what I had, but create something better. And I want you as my partner." Serena looked up from the laptop, eyebrows raised. "Partner as an employee? Because I need to finish my degree and—" "Partner as an equal owner," William interrupted. 50-50. Not you working for me, but us building something together. You bring the technical brilliance I clearly lack. I bring business experience and whatever credibility I can salvage. We make decisions together. We share profits equally. We build a company that doesn't treat people like I treated your mother, like they're invisible unless they're useful. The apartment went quiet. Gail had frozen in the kitchen doorway. Serena stared at him with an expression William couldn't quite read. "Mr. Dickerson," Serena said slowly, 48 hours ago you thought I was just some community college kid who couldn't possibly help you. Now you're offering me half of whatever you build next. Why should I believe this is real and not just gratitude that'll evaporate once your crisis is over?" It was a fair question. William looked at this brilliant young woman who'd seen what his expensive experts had missed, who'd risked criminal charges to help him find the truth, and he tried to articulate something he was only beginning to understand himself. "Because everything I built before was founded on the wrong principles," he said. "I measured worth by credentials and bank accounts. I built hierarchies where I was always at the top, and everyone else was ranked by their proximity to me. And it made me successful and wealthy and completely alone." He gestured at the evidence on the screen. "Vance destroyed me because I couldn't see the threat. I was too arrogant to listen to warnings, too isolated to have anyone who actually cared enough to protect me. I don't want to build that again." He looked at Gail, still standing in the doorway. "Your mother showed me kindness when I deserved none. You showed me competence I was too prejudiced to recognize. You both showed me that the people I'd spent my life overlooking were the only ones worth trusting when everything fell apart. So yes, Serena, equal partners. Because I finally understand that's not generosity on my part. It's the smartest decision I could possibly make. Serena exchanged a long look with her mother. Gail nodded slightly, some wordless communication passing between them. Then Serena extended her hand across the table. Equal partners, she said. But I have conditions. We build something ethical. We hire people others overlook. And my mom gets a seat on the board. William shook her hand, then looked at Gail. I wouldn't have it any other way. The media blitz started Monday morning. William woke to his phone exploding with notifications. News alerts, social media tags, messages from lawyers and former colleagues. Edward Vance had called a press conference, and the performance was masterful. Standing before a wall of microphones, Vance looked like concern personified. It pains me to say this about someone I once considered a friend, but William Dickerson's recent behavior has become increasingly erratic and delusional. Rather than accept responsibility for his company's failure, he's constructed an elaborate conspiracy theory, going so far as to break into our building and steal proprietary data. A pause, perfectly timed. We have him on security footage. We're pursuing criminal charges. The footage rolled on every news channel. Grainy security video showing 3 figures moving through Dickerson Technologies after hours. The image quality was deliberately poor, enough to confirm their presence, but not clear enough to show Gail's service credentials or the fact that they'd accessed only the servers containing evidence of Vance's crimes. But Vance wasn't finished. By Tuesday, the smear had evolved into something more vicious. Anonymous sources leaked to tabloids and business blogs, each story more damaging than the last. Former Billionaire's mental breakdown, friends worried. Dickerson accused of inappropriate relationship with household staff. And worst of all, community college students' get-rich-quick scheme. Did she manipulate desperate former CEO? The articles about Serena carried unmistakable racist undertones. Her background was weaponized. Community college presented not as legitimate education, but as proof of inadequacy. Her mother's profession used to suggest impropriety. Her technical skills reframed as hacking. Photos of her were paired with shots of William in ways designed to imply scandal. William watched Serena read the headlines with an expression of controlled fury, saw Gail's hands shake as she scrolled through social media comments that said things about her daughter that made William's blood boil. They were being systematically destroyed in the court of public opinion before any actual court could hear the evidence. He's good, Serena said bitterly, staring at her laptop. Make it about my background, my race, my mother's job. Make people doubt me before they ever see the evidence. Classic misdirection. We fight back, Williams said. We release the Project Olympus files, show everyone exactly what Vance planned. And get accused of fabricating evidence, Serena countered. He's already seeded the narrative that we're desperate criminals. Anything we release now looks like exactly what he's claiming. A conspiracy theory from people with nothing to lose. She was right, and William hated it. Vance had outmaneuvered them, turned their evidence into potential proof of their own criminality. They needed something irrefutable, something Vance couldn't dismiss or spin. There has to be something else, Gail said quietly. Something in those files that even Vance can't explain away. Serena had been living in the Project Olympus data for 3 days, analyzing every file, every timestamp, every fragment of code. But now she went back with different eyes, looking not for documentation of the plan, but for proof of its execution that couldn't be denied. She found it at 2 in the morning on Thursday. William, Mom, you need to see this. Her voice was shaking, but not with exhaustion, with excitement. The file was buried in a subdirectory labeled Board Communications, dated 6 weeks before the crash. Serena opened it, and a video conference window filled the screen. Edward Vance sat in his home office, speaking to 2 other men William recognized, board members who'd voted to remove him. Vance's voice was clear. The malware is in place. When I trigger it, Dickerson's system will collapse in under 6 minutes. The shorts are positioned to net us approximately $400 million collectively. The board vote is secured. I have 8 confirmed votes for his removal. More than enough. We execute on the 15th, during his product launch, for maximum media impact. One of the other men asked, and the algorithm itself? Once we acquire the company assets, already copied and secure in our offshore servers, we let Dickerson take the fall, buy the company for pennies at bankruptcy auction, and rebuild it under new branding. He gets destroyed. We get his life's work. Everyone wins except William. The video was 12 minutes long. It detailed everything. The timeline, the financial arrangements, the coordinated board betrayal, even discussion of how to handle the media narrative afterward. It was a complete confession, recorded and stored in Vance's own secure files because he'd never imagined anyone would access them. William watched it twice, barely breathing. This is it. This is everything we need. It's time-stamped and authenticated, Serena said. Stored on Vance's own servers, encrypted with his own security protocols. He can't claim it's fabricated. It's got his digital signature all over it. And look at the metadata. This was automatically backed up to multiple locations. We pulled it from his executive backup system. The same system his lawyers will have to acknowledge exists. Gail put her hand on William's shoulder. Now we can fight back. William looked at the frozen image of Edward Vance on screen, caught in his moment of supreme confidence, certain he'd committed the perfect crime. Now we destroy him, he said quietly, the same way he tried to destroy us. With the truth. They called Jennifer Torres, the civil rights attorney who'd agreed to represent them despite the odds. She watched the video in silence, then smiled with something approaching predatory satisfaction. "Gentlemen," she said, looking at the image of Vance and his co-conspirators, "I think it's time we had a conversation with the FBI, and then we're going to trial." The federal courthouse was packed with journalists, former employees, and investors who'd lost fortunes in the crash. William sat at the plaintiff's table between Jennifer Torres and Serena, acutely aware of the cameras documenting his every expression. Across the aisle, Edward Vance projected absolute confidence, his legal team a wall of expensive suits and practiced intimidation. The prosecution built their case methodically over 3 days. Forensic analysts confirmed the malware's origin. Financial experts traced the illegal short positions. Former board members turned states' evidence in exchange for reduced charges. But everyone knew the trial's outcome would hinge on a single piece of evidence. The video confession Serena had found buried in Project Olympus. When Serena took the stand on the 4th day, she wore a simple navy dress and carried herself with quiet dignity that reminded William painfully of her mother. Vance's lead attorney, a man named Harrison Blackwell who specialized in destroying witnesses, approached with barely concealed contempt. "Miss Gregory," he began, "you attend community college, correct?" "Not exactly MIT or Stanford. I attend community college because it's what my family can afford," Serena replied evenly. "My education's value isn't determined by its price tag. Yet you expect this court to believe you uncovered a sophisticated conspiracy that eluded trained professionals. I expect this court to examine the evidence I found, regardless of where I learned to find it." Jennifer Torres stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to present Exhibit A7. The video filled the courtroom screens. Edward Vance's voice echoed through the space. "The malware is in place. When I trigger it, Dickerson's system will collapse in under 6 minutes." William watched Vance's face as his own words condemned him. The confident mask cracked, replaced by something approaching panic. His attorneys huddled immediately, whispering urgently, but there was nothing to say. The video was authenticated, time-stamped, pulled from Vance's own secure servers. Blackwell made a desperate attempt at recovery. This video could have been fabricated, manipulated. The defense's own technical expert already confirmed its authenticity this morning. Jennifer interrupted. "It's stored on servers your client controls, encrypted with his personal security protocols, backed up automatically by systems he designed. Unless Mr. Vance is claiming he fabricated evidence of his own crimes." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. On the charge of securities fraud, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of corporate sabotage, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, Guilty. Vance's face went ashen as the bailiff approached with handcuffs. The man who'd orchestrated William's destruction with such precision was led from the courtroom in restraints, photographers capturing every moment of his fall. Outside the courthouse, William made a brief statement to the assembled media. Justice was served today, but not by me. It was served by two remarkable women who had every reason to let me fail and chose instead to help me find the truth. This victory belongs to Gail Gregory and her daughter Serena, who proved that worth isn't measured by credentials or bank accounts. It's measured by character. 6 months later, William stood in a renovated warehouse space in a neighborhood that had seen better decades, but was slowly revitalizing. The exposed brick walls were lined with workstations occupied by a diverse team of engineers and developers, many of them recruited from community colleges and state universities, places where brilliant minds often went overlooked by traditional tech recruiters. The sign above the door read, Gregory Technologies. Serena moved between workstations with the easy authority of someone born to lead, answering questions and solving problems with efficiency that reminded William daily why making her an equal partner was the smartest decision of his life. Gail sat in the conference room they'd converted from the old warehouse office, reviewing community partnership proposals for their scholarship program with the same meticulous attention she'd once brought to cleaning his penthouse. The company was smaller than Dickerson Technologies had been, but it was profitable, ethical, and built on principles William had never valued in his first empire. They turned down 3 acquisition offers from major firms, refusing to compromise their mission for quick money. Their algorithm focused not on maximum profit extraction, but on identifying sustainable investment opportunities in overlooked communities. William found Gail in the conference room during lunch, looking over applications for their newest scholarship initiative. 53 applicants this month, she said, smiling. All from backgrounds that would have gotten them ignored by traditional recruiters. Like Serena, William said, sitting across from her. Like Serena, Gail agreed. Like a lot of brilliant people who just need someone to see them. William looked around the space they'd built together, messy, vital, full of voices and perspective his old company never would have included. You know what the strangest part is? I spent 20 years building an empire worth billions, and I was miserable, isolated, surrounded by people who'd betray me the moment it was profitable. Now I'm worth maybe 1% of what I had before, and I've never been happier. Gail's expression softened. That's because you finally understand what actually matters. I do, William said quietly. And it's because you showed me. Both of you. When I'd lost everything and deserved nothing, you gave me kindness I hadn't earned and a chance I didn't deserve. You saw something worth saving when I couldn't see anything but ruin. We saw a person in pain, Gail said simply. That was enough. Serena appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. Board meeting in 10 minutes. We're voting on the expansion proposal and the new equity sharing plan. Board meeting, William repeated with a slight smile. The board consisted of 3 people, himself, Serena, and Gail, making decisions together without hierarchy or power plays. Still getting used to that being something that doesn't terrify me. You're learning, Serena said, grinning. Slowly, but you're learning. As they gathered around the small conference table, William looked at the 2 women who'd saved him from his own arrogance and built something meaningful from the ashes of his empire. The fallen billionaire, the invisible maid, and the overlooked genius. An unlikely partnership that had become the foundation for something better than anything he'd built alone. He'd lost a $5 billion empire and gained something infinitely more valuable. Partners who saw him clearly, a mission that mattered, and the wisdom to finally understand that the people he'd spent his life overlooking were the only ones truly worth seeing. Shall we begin? Gail asked, and William nodded, ready to build the future together. William Dickerson lost $5 billion in 5 minutes, but what he gained was priceless. The ability to finally see the people he'd spent a lifetime rendering invisible. His salvation didn't come from boardrooms or Ivy League experts. It came from a woman he'd ignored for 6 years, and her brilliant daughter he almost dismissed in seconds. This story asks us an uncomfortable question. Who are you overlooking right now? The person who cleans your office, serves your coffee, or works quietly in the background while you chase what you think matters. What brilliance, what wisdom, what grace might they possess that you've trained yourself not to see? William's greatest fortune wasn't the empire he built. It was losing everything and discovering that worth isn't measured by credentials, corner offices, or bank accounts. It's measured by character, courage, and a humility to accept help from unexpected places. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories about redemption, justice, and the unlikely heroes who change everything. And here's my question for you. If you lost everything tomorrow, who would extend their hand to help you? And more importantly, would you have the humility to take it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one.